The New South Wales Government has introduced some changes to its responsible service of alcohol guidelines, now requiring that any liquor licence holder undergo specific training in relation to sexual harassment and sexual violence. To get across what we're seeing there, Joydeep Hoare is joining us from People and Culture Strategies. Joydeep, welcome. So this comes after some high-profile incidents. What's happened?
Yeah, that's right. I think there was a lot of attention last year. Probably the microscope applied for the first time in relation to a sector where it's been well known that there are some, for want of a better word, interesting behaviours when it comes to what would be considered appropriate conduct by modern workplace standards. In that hospitality sector, a lot of individuals, a lot of female workers coming forward and saying that they'd been exposed to not just sexual harassment, but some very serious conduct that would amount to sexual assault and rape and criminal activity. So an interesting but important response from the government that now ties in what many would say is an employer's ordinary obligations anyway when it comes to educating staff about appropriate workplace behaviour, be that discrimination, sexual harassment, etc. But now actually bringing that front and centre, if you like, in terms of the responsible service of alcohol ecosystem. So in order to now receive your qualifications and your accreditation, that you have to undergo mandatory training in relation to this particular area as well. So it's just interesting that it's been mandated in the context of that, and a commentary, I think, inferentially around the linkage between alcohol consumption and these inappropriate behaviours. And I think what's interesting is it's not just something that is limited as being a problem in the hospitality sector. I think this is something that applies. We see this at Christmas party season, we see this at off-site events. That linkage between alcohol and the higher incidence of sexual harassment complaints is very real.
So, if you're in the industry, be it you're an employee or an employer, what do you need to be aware of?
Well, you need to be aware that the provisions that might have applied up to now, whereby a license was granted to you, has been modified. So there are stricter requirements. This is a mandatory, it's not an optional elective course that you can do in order to be a holder validly in the state of New South Wales of a liquor licence. You need to have undergone this training, and that's then going to flow on to anyone who you employ. So let's say you're a hospitality venue, an owner of a bar or multiple bars, then not just your leadership, but anyone who is going to be serving alcohol to patrons, customers, etc., are all going to need to have gone through this particular training, and a failure to do so could see your licence revoked or other penalties imposed.
So is that, given the obligations that are already there for employers to make sure that they conduct that training, is this a step further then, is there?
Yeah, it is. And I think what it's really saying is that leave aside what might be an employer's responsibility generally, and that would not be different whether it's my firm or any other industry, that you have an obligation to take reasonable steps as an employer to ensure that your employees are aware of their responsibilities when it comes to appropriate workplace behaviour. I think what this is doing is it's saying, well, actually, now we want to build awareness in this particular sector around this as a problem, and tie it into the decisions that are made, the judgment calls that are to be made by those working in the sector when it comes to how they deal with patrons. So it's almost like saying we need you to be better educated, that if you don't exercise your duties in relation to the provision of alcohol responsibly, there is a very real risk that there could be behaviours that flow from that, not just from a disruptive behaviour in the pub or the bar, but actually direct behaviours that could amount to sexual harassment and sexual violence in that particular establishment. And who's that likely to be meted out to? Well, sure, it could be fellow patrons, but it could very much be meted out to other employees in the organisation. So I think this is really saying, look, responsibilities that employers have had are there, they're unchanged, but this now heightens that responsibility in terms of the linkage with how alcohol is served, alcohol is provided.
Does this, Joydeep, stem from the respected work inquiry that was done a few years ago? And as a result, is more regulation likely to be imposed, do you think?
Yeah, I think that the respected work inquiry has had some extraordinary impact in terms of not just what governments do across a range of sectors in terms of sexual harassment and sexual harassment prevention, or sexual violence prevention for that matter, but just in terms of this introduction of what is referred to as the positive duty, so that employers can no longer just sit on their hands when it comes to these kinds of matters in their organisations, which has historically been the paradigm that employers have applied. In other words, they've said, look, it's not like we encourage sexual harassment or inappropriate behaviours, but what we will do is if someone is harassed or claims that they're harassed and makes a complaint to us about it, we'll absolutely intervene at that particular point. And what the Respect at Work inquiry did, and the law changes that happened as a result of that, said that's not enough. And the reason why that's not enough is because, simply put, it's only a minority of people who experience these behaviours who ever escalate it to their employer anyway. So employers have to be a lot more proactive, hence the creation of this positive duty. So I think what we see with these changes in relation to the provision of alcohol law changes in New South Wales is it's saying it's not just about what the Respect at Work changes required in terms of this positive duty. It's now about what this needs to translate into in terms of philosophical approaches. We need as a society to be a bit more mindful as to what are the root causes of some of these inappropriate behaviours, and let's try to fix it at that particular point. So it's very much a shift towards the reactive is not enough. It's all about the proactivity from this point onwards.